My uncle laughed in my face, announcing to the entire engagement party that I was still a pathetic pizza delivery girl at 29. I just smiled, knowing my net worth eclipsed everyone's combined. Then the groom walked in, recognized me, and the color drained from his face. Before we continue today's story, we have an urgent announcement to make. Due to technical issues, we are pivoting towards another channel. Please subscribe to our new channel, Inherited Revenge. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The smell of pepperoni and stale cardboard still clung to my hair, a scent that had become my armor and my disguise. I checked my reflection in the darkened window of the venue's heavy oak doors. My polo shirt, emblazoned with the bright orange Zipgo logo, was wrinkled. My jeans had a smudge of grease on the thigh. I looked exactly like what they expected me to be, a failure. My stomach churned, not from hunger, but from a toxic cocktail of exhaustion and dread. It had been a 14-hour day, not sitting in a corner office, but on the ground, running the beta test routes for the new unparalleled logistics algorithm my team had spent 18 months coding. I needed to know how the drivers felt. I needed to know if the last mile promise we sold to investors was actually viable in heavy traffic. So I drove, I delivered, I sweated. And now I was late. Just get in, say congratulations to Liliana, and get out, I whispered to myself, smoothing down the frizzy flyaways at my temples. You don't need their approval. You haven't needed it for a long time. But that was a lie. There is a specific hollow ache that comes from being the black sheep of a family obsessed with appearances. It didn't matter what I knew to be true, it mattered what they saw. And what they saw was Kinsley, the dropout, the drifter, the disappointment. I pushed the doors open. The contrast was like a physical slap. The air inside was cool and scented with expensive lilies and expensive perfume. Soft jazz floated from a live band in the corner. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto a sea of tuxedos and evening gowns. The clinking of champagne flutes stopped near the entrance as heads turned. I froze. I had meant to slip in through the side, maybe find a bathroom to change into the dress I had crumpled in my backpack. But the side entrance had been locked, and in my fatigue, I just walked through the front. Well, 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 a booming voice sliced through the jazz. I closed my eyes for a second, bracing myself. Uncle Richard. He was holding court near the center of the room, a glass of scotch in one hand, his other arm draped expansively over the back of a velvet sofa. He turned, his face flushing with that familiar mix of performative amusement and genuine disdain. Look who finally decided to show up, Richard shouted, making sure the people in the back could hear. He gestured at me with his glass, sloshing amber liquid over the rim. And she's in uniform. Ladies and gentlemen, I think our dinner has arrived. A ripple of laughter moved through the room. It wasn't warm, it was sharp, jagged. I forced my chin up and stepped fully into the light. Hello, Uncle Richard. Happy engagement to Liliana. He didn't let it go. He never let it go. He walked toward me, his expensive Italian loafers clicking on the marble floor. He looked me up and down, sneering at the grease stain on my jeans. Kinsley, honestly, he said, lowering his voice to a stage whisper that was somehow louder than his shout. This is a black tie event for your cousin. Liliana is marrying into the Stratton family. Do you understand what that means? And you walk in here smelling like garlic and failure. I was working, Richard, I said quietly, keeping my voice steady. I didn't have time to change. Working, he scoffed, turning back to the crowd, grinning. She calls it working. Still delivering pizzas at 29, Kinsley. I told your father, God rest his soul, that letting you drop out of business school was a mistake. But no, you had a vision. Is this the vision? 30-minute delivery or it's free. My cousin Anthony, Richard's son, stepped up beside his father. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, swirling a martini. Come on, Dad, Anthony smirked, looking at me with pity. Someone has to serve the food. Maybe Kinsley can help the catering staff. they seem a bit overwhelmed. The humiliation burned hot in my chest, radiating up my neck. It wasn't just the words, it was the history behind them. It was 10 years of being told I wasn't enough. It was the way they looked at me, like I was a stain on their perfect pedigree. "I'm just here to wish Liliana well," I said, my voice tight. "I'll stay in the back." "You do that," Richard said, his smile vanishing, replaced by a cold, hard stare. "Stay in the back, stay out of the photos. Roman, Liliana's fiancé, is a very important man. He works in venture capital. He deals with winners, Kinsley. He doesn't need to see this." He flicked his hand at my Zipgo shirt. "Try not to embarrass us more than you already have." He turned his back on me, dismissing me like a servant. The circle of relatives closed around him again, their laughter resuming, lighter now, relieved that the awkwardness was contained. I stood there for a moment, gripping the strap of my backpack until my knuckles turned white. I could feel the weight of the phone in my pocket. If I pulled it out, I could show them. I could show them the bank balance. I could show them the Forbes article that was scheduled to drop next week with my face on the cover. The betrayal was worse than the insults. It was the absolute certainty that they enjoyed seeing me fall. I retreated to the shadows of the ballroom, finding a spot near a decorative pillar wrapped in ivy. From here, I was invisible, just another piece of the background, like the servers gliding by with trays of escargot. My heart was still hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that refused to slow down. It wasn't fear. I dealt with hostile board members and aggressive takeover attempts for breakfast. It was the regression. Being back in this room with these people stripped away the CEO, the innovator, the woman who had built an empire from a basement apartment. It turned me back into Kinsley, the orphan niece, the charity case. I watched Liliana across the room. She looked stunning, I had to admit. Her dress was a custom silk creation, shimmering under the lights. She was laughing, her head thrown back, holding court with a group of bridesmaids who all looked like carbon copies of her. "I can't believe she actually wore that," I heard a voice drift over. It was Anthony again. He hadn't seen me in the shadows. He was talking to a stunning woman in a red dress, one of Liliana's friends. "Who?" the woman asked, sipping her wine. "My cousin, the pizza girl," Anthony chuckled, shaking his head. "It's tragic, really. Dad offered to get her a job at his firm in the mailroom years ago just to get her off the streets. She refused, said she wanted to build something of her own. Can you imagine the arrogance? And now look at her, delivering fast food while Liliana is marrying a Stratton." "That's so sad," the woman cooed, though she sounded bored. "Is she, slow?" "Just stubborn," Anthony said, taking a bite of a canapé. "And jealous. That's why she came looking like that. She wants to ruin Liliana's night. It's a cry for attention." I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted copper. Jealous. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen lit up, a beacon of my reality in this fog of their delusions. I opened the Zipgo admin app. Active drivers, 14,502. Daily revenue, $2.4 million. Pending acquisition offers, 3. I stared at the numbers. They were clean. They were undeniable. They were the result of 5 years of not sleeping, of eating instant noodles, of coding until my eyes bled, of driving routes myself to understand the user experience. "They have no idea," I whispered. "No idea about what?" I jumped. Liliana was standing there. She had broken away from her admirers and had spotted me lurking. Her smile was tight, her eyes scanning my outfit with undisguised disgust. "Liliana," I said, sliding the phone back into my pocket. "You look beautiful. Congratulations." "Kinsley," she sighed, shaking her head. "Dad told me you were here dressed like a vagrant. I didn't want to believe him. Why would you do this to me?" "I didn't do it to you, Lily. I was working. I came straight here because I didn't want to miss the toasts. I thought family mattered more than a dress code." "Don't give me that moral high ground garbage," she snapped, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You did this to embarrass us. Roman is going to be here any second. He's flying in from a meeting in Silicon Valley. He's bringing his partners. Do you know who these people are? They control the market. And I have a cousin standing here who looks like she just crawled out of a dumpster. I can leave, I said, my patience fraying. If my presence is that offensive, I'll go. No, she said sharply. If you leave now, it looks like a scene. Just go to the bathroom, wash your face, maybe put your hair up, and for God's sake, stay away from Roman. He's brilliant, Kinsley. He doesn't have time for people who can't get their lives together. He's intense. He destroys weak companies for a living. She looked at me with a triumphant smirk. Actually, maybe you should talk to him. Maybe he can give you a tip on how to get a manager position at the pizza place. She turned and floated away, back to the light, back to the applause. I leaned back against the pillar, the stone all against my burning skin. They were so confident. They were so secure in their little hierarchy where Richard was the king, Anthony was the prince, Liliana was the princess, and I was the peasant. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. The world outside this ballroom didn't run on their rules anymore. It ran on data. It ran on speed. It ran on the very systems I had built. I looked at the grand entrance. Roman was coming. The brilliant VC, the man who destroys weak companies. A strange, cold calm settled over me. I knew the name Stratton. I knew the firm. In fact, I knew them very well. They see a driver, I thought, watching Richard laugh at another joke at my expense. But they don't realize I own the road. To understand why I stood there and took it, you have to understand the debt. Not a financial one. God knows I didn't owe them a cent, but an emotional one I had foolishly assigned to myself. My parents died when I was 19. A car accident. Instant, brutal, and final. I was a sophomore in college studying business. I was left with a house I couldn't afford, a mountain of grief, and a younger brother, Leo, who needed stability. I went to Uncle Richard. He was my father's older brother. He was the successful one, the real estate mogul of the county. I sat in his mahogany-paneled office, clutching a folder of my parents' funeral expenses and my tuition bills, and I asked for help. Not a handout. A loan. I remember the way he looked at me then. It was the same look he gave me tonight. Kinsley, he had said, steepling his fingers. Your father was a dreamer. He never understood the value of hard currency. If I give you money, you'll just squander it. You need to learn resilience. You need to struggle. It builds character. He refused to give me a dime. He didn't even offer to pay for the flowers at the funeral. So I dropped out. I sold the house. I moved Leo and me into a studio apartment that smelled like mildew. I took a job dispatching for a local courier service during the day and driving for a food delivery app at night. That was where it started. Dispatching was chaos. Drivers were inefficient. Routes were overlapped. Food arrived cold. Packages arrived late. I saw the patterns. I saw the math in the mess. I started coding on a refurbished laptop I bought from a pawn shop. I built Zipgo not because I wanted to be rich, but because I needed to optimize my own time to make enough money to buy Leo braces. For 5 years, I was a ghost. I missed weddings. I missed Christmases. I missed Liliana's graduation. They thought I was flaking. They thought I was lazy. In reality, I was building the back-end infrastructure for what would become the largest logistics network in the hemisphere. I sacrificed my reputation in this family to build a future they couldn't touch. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard's voice boomed again, snapping me out of my memory. He was standing on the small stage now, tapping a microphone. If I could have your attention, the man of the hour has arrived. The double doors swung open again. The room went silent, a reverent hush falling over the crowd. Roman Stratton walked in. He looked exactly like his press photos, perhaps even sharper. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. He had the kind of face that didn't smile easily, angular, intense, with eyes that scanned a room like a predator assessing a herd. Behind him trailed 3 other men in suits, his entourage, or perhaps his analysts. Liliana let out a squeal of delight and rushed toward him. Roman caught her hands, kissing her cheek, but I noticed his eyes didn't stay on her. They were still scanning, still assessing. He looked bored. He looked like a man who had been dragged to a tedious obligation when he would rather be closing a deal. Richard practically sprinted off the stage to greet him. "Roman, my boy, welcome, welcome." Richard pumped Roman's hand aggressively. "We were just talking about you. Everyone is dying to meet the genius behind Stratton Capital." Roman gave a polite, tight-lipped nod. "Good to see you, Richard. Traffic was a nightmare." Of course," Richard laughed nervously. "Well, you're here now. Come, let me introduce you to the family properly. You know Anthony." I watched from my pillar, fascinated. Roman was a shark. I recognized the body language. I had sat across boardroom tables from men exactly like him. They respected power. They respected leverage. And they despised desperation. Richard reeked of desperation. "And over there," Richard was saying, sweeping his arm around the room, "is Aunt Margaret and Cousin Joey. Oh, and don't mind the girl in the corner." Richard pointed directly at me. Roman's gaze followed Richard's finger. "That's just Kinsley," Richard chuckled, his voice carrying in the quiet room. "Our little family charity case. She came straight from her delivery route. We're trying to get her to go change. Or leave, but, well, you know how it is. You can't save everyone, right, Roman?" Roman's eyes locked onto me. I didn't look away, I didn't flush, I didn't cower. I straightened my spine, took a sip of my water, and held his gaze. At that distance, I saw the moment of recognition hit him. It was subtle at first, a narrowing of the eyes, a slight tilt of the head. He looked at the orange logo on my shirt. Zipgo. Then he looked back at my face. He stopped walking. Liliana was tugging on his arm, trying to pull him toward the bar. "Roman, honey, come on, I want you to try the signature cocktail." Roman didn't move. He shook Liliana's hand off his arm, not roughly, but distractedly. He went pale. It was a distinctive drain of color, the kind you see when a man realizes he has made a massive miscalculation, or when he realizes he is standing in the presence of something far dangerous than he anticipated. "Roman," Richard asked, his smile faltering, "is everything all right?" Roman ignored him. He reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out his phone. His thumbs moved in a blur. The room went silent. Everyone was watching him. Richard looked confused. Liliana looked annoyed. Anthony looked bored. I just watched. I knew exactly what he was typing. He was typing my name. Or maybe he was checking the cap table of the company he had been trying to acquire for 6 months. Roman looked at his phone screen. Then he looked at me, then back at the screen. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. He took a step toward me. "Roman, seriously," Richard laughed nervously, stepping in his path. "Don't waste your time. She's just the pizza girl. She's—" "Quiet," Roman snapped. It wasn't a shout, but it cracked through the room like a whip. Richard froze, his mouth hanging open. Roman pushed past him. He walked past Liliana. He walked past Anthony. He crossed the dance floor, his eyes never leaving mine. The crowd parted for him, confusion rippling through the guests like a wave. He stopped 3 feet in front of me. He looked at the grease stain on my jeans. He looked at the tired circles under my eyes. Then he looked at the logo on my chest. "Kinsley," he asked. His voice was hoarse. "Hello, Roman," I said calmly. "I believe you've been sending me emails. Sorry I haven't replied. I've been busy." I gestured to my delivery uniform. Roman swallowed hard. You are the CEO? You are K.R. Vance." "I am," I said. The silence in the room was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. I have been trying to get a meeting with you for a year," Roman stammered, his composure cracking. "Your algorithm, the Q3 projections, it's a unicorn, you're a unicorn." "I'm a pizza girl, Roman," I said, my voice projecting clearly to where Richard stood frozen. "Just ask my uncle." The silence that followed my declaration wasn't empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and absolutely delicious. It hung in the air like smoke, choking the laughter that had filled the room only moments before. Uncle Richard was the first to try and break it. He let out a laugh, a sharp, barking sound that cracked under the pressure of the room's quiet. "Oh, that's rich," Richard sputtered, looking around at the guests with wide, pleading eyes. That is a good one, Kinsley. A CEO. Did you hear that, Anthony? She's playing pretend. She's probably drunk." "I apologize, Roman. The girl has always had a flair for the dramatic, a bit of a pathological need for attention." "Show me," Roman said. He didn't look at Richard. He didn't look at Liliana, who was gripping his arm so hard her knuckles were white. He was looking at me. I pulled my phone out again. I didn't open the bank app this time. I opened the developer interface for Zipgo, the side of the app only 3 people in the world had access to. I navigated to the real-time logistics map, a mesmerizing web of thousands of moving dots representing active deliveries across the tri-state area, superimposed over a live revenue stream ticker. I turned the screen toward Roman. He stepped closer, his eyes darting across the data. He recognized the interface. He recognized the proprietary heat mapping technology that his own analysts had been writing white papers about for months. He saw the live feed of the server load. "The latency," Roman murmured, almost to himself. "It's under 20 milliseconds. How did you achieve that stability with this volume?" "Distributed mesh networking," I answered, my voice steady, slipping effortlessly into the language I spoke best. "We don't route through a central hub anymore. Every driver's device acts as a node. The algorithm predicts the traffic patterns before they form. We're not reacting to the road, Roman. We're solving it." Roman looked up from the screen, his expression transforming from shock to a kind of professional reverence. It was the look of a man seeing fire for the first time. "You're KR Vance," he said, saying T. He named like it was a holy relic. Kinsley Rose Vance. I assumed KR was a man. I assumed he was a 50-year-old logistics veteran from FedEx or UPS. "Most people do," I said dryly. "It helps with negotiations. Men don't like to be disrupted by a girl in a pizza shirt." "This is insane," Richard shouted, physically stepping between us now, his face a mottled purple. "Roman, stop indulging her. It's a trick. She's probably hacked something. Kinsley, put that phone away before I have security throw you out for fraud." Roman turned to Richard slowly. The look on his face was terrifying. It wasn't the polite annoyance he had shown earlier. It was the cold, dead stare of a man who realized someone had been trying to sell him a counterfeit watch. "Richard," Roman said, his voice dangerously low, "do you know what the valuation of Zipgo was at the close of markets yesterday?" Richard blinked, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. The pizza app, I don't know, Roman, 50,000, who cares?" 1.2 billion, Roman said. The gasp that went through the room was audible. Someone dropped a glass, the shatter was deafening. "Billion," Roman repeated, emphasizing the B. "With a B. And your niece owns 51% of the controlling stock." Richard looked at me. For the first time in my life, I didn't see contempt in his eyes. I saw fear, pure, unadulterated terror. It was the look of a man realizing the ant he had been stepping on was actually a sleeping lion. "I need to speak with you," Roman said to me, ignoring his future father-in-law completely. "Privately, there are implications, structural things regarding the merger I've been discussing with Richard." I raised an eyebrow. "Merger?" "We can use the library," Roman said, gesturing toward the heavy double doors at the far end of the ballroom. "Roman, wait," Liliana cried out, her voice shrill. "We haven't even cut the cake. You can't just walk off with her." 5 minutes, Lily," Roman said, not looking back. He ushered me toward the doors. As we walked, the crowd parted for me. People who had sneered at my grease-stained jeans 10 minutes ago now looked at me with hungry, calculating eyes. I saw a woman nudge her husband and point. I saw Anthony staring into his empty martini glass, looking like he might be sick. We entered the library, and the heavy doors clicked shut, muting the jazz and the murmurs. The room was lined with books Richard had never read. Roman turned to me, his demeanor shifting instantly from social to business. "You have to understand, Kinsley, I didn't know. If I had known you were family." "If you had known, what?" I asked, leaning against a mahogany desk. "You would have treated me with basic human decency, or you would have just tried to buy my company sooner." "Both," he admitted, surprisingly honest. "But that's not the point. The point is Richard." "What about him?" Roman sighed, running a hand through his hair. "He's been pitching me for 6 months. He wants Stratton Capital to bail out his commercial real estate portfolio. He's underwater, Kinsley. Deeply. He's leveraged everything. This house, his firm, Liliana's dowry." I felt a cold spike in my chest. "He's broke." "He's worse than broke. He's insolvent. He's been keeping up appearances on credit and loans from questionable sources. He sold me on the idea that the Vance family had hidden assets he could leverage to secure the loan. He implied he had silent partners." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "He meant me. He didn't know I was rich, but he knew I was a Vance. He probably planned to guilt me into signing something eventually, or he was just lying to buy time until the wedding," Roman said grimly. "Once I'm married to Liliana, it becomes much harder for me to let my father-in-law go bankrupt. It would look bad for the firm. It's a trap, Kinsley, a marriage trap." I stared at Roman, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. The extravagance of the party. The desperation in Richard's eyes when Roman walked in. The vitriol toward me. It wasn't just that he hated me, it was that he needed me to be small. He needed me to be the failure so he could be the savior, the patriarch who held the family together. If I was successful, his entire narrative and his leverage crumbled. "Show me the pitch," I said. Roman pulled a folded document from his inside jacket pocket. "I carry the term sheet. We were supposed to sign a letter of intent tonight, after the cake." I took the paper. It was thick, creamy stock. Stratton Capital and Vance Holdings, strategic partnership. I scanned the financials. It was a work of fiction. Richard had listed assets that had been sold years ago. He had inflated the value of the estate we were currently standing in by 300%. But then my finger stopped on a line item on page 4. Guarantor Assets, the Leo Vance Education Trust. The room spun. "That son of a bitch," I whispered. "What is it?" Roman asked, stepping closer. "Leo," I said, my voice trembling with a rage I hadn't felt since the funeral. "My brother. When my parents died, there was a small life insurance policy. It wasn't much, maybe $50,000. Richard was the executor. He told me it was gone. He told me it was used to pay off my father's debts. That's why I had to drop out. That's why I had to work 3 jobs." I pointed at the line. "He didn't pay debts. He kept it. He put it in a trust under his own control, and he's been using it as collateral to float his loans." The library doors banged open. Richard stood there, his chest heaving. Liliana and Anthony were right behind him, looking terrified. "That is enough," Richard roared, marching into the room. "Roman, get away from her. She's poisoning you. She's a liar. She's always been a liar." I looked up from the document, my eyes locking onto his. I didn't feel the old fear. I didn't feel the need to shrink. I felt like a guillotine blade waiting to drop. "I'm reading your term sheet, Richard," I said, my voice deadly calm. Richard froze. His eyes darted to the paper in my hand, then to Roman. That is confidential business information. Give it to me." "You listed the Leo Vance Trust as collateral," I said, taking a step toward him. "You told me that money didn't exist." It doesn't," Richard stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. It's a placeholder, just financial jargon. You wouldn't understand, you deliver pizzas." "I understand that listing a non-existent asset to secure a loan from a federally regulated financial institution is bank fraud," I said. "And I understand that if the asset does exist, and you hid it from the beneficiaries for 10 years while we starved, that's embezzlement." "You ungrateful little brat." Richard lunged forward, his hand raised as if to strike me. Roman moved faster than I expected. He stepped in front of me, catching Richard's wrist in midair. It wasn't a violent grab, but it was firm, immovable. "Don't," Roman said softly. "Do not touch her." Richard yanked his arm back, panting. He looked at Liliana, desperate for an ally. "Lily, tell him your cousin is crazy. She's ruining your night. She's jealous of you." Liliana looked at her father, then at me. Her lip quivered. "Daddy, what is she talking about? What trust?" "Nothing," Richard screamed. "She's making it up, look at her. She's in a dirty shirt, she's filth." "I might be in a dirty shirt," I said, "but I'm the only one in this room who isn't a fraud." I turned to Roman. "I need 5 minutes. I need to make a phone call." "Who are you calling?" Richard sneered. "Your shift manager." "My legal team," I said, "and the forensic accountants who handle my acquisitions. If that money is there, Richard, or if it was there and you spent it, I will find every cent, and I will bury you." I walked out of the library, leaving the three of them in a suffocating silence. I went straight to the terrace. The night air was cool, biting against my heated skin. My hands were shaking as I dialed. "Kinsley," the voice on the other end was Marcus, my COO and oldest friend. "It's 10 p.m. on a Saturday. Did the server farm catch fire?" "I need you to run a search," I said, my voice tight. "Richard Vance Realty Group, and I need you to pull the probate records for my parents' estate from 2016. Look for a trust specifically named Leo Vance Education Fund." "Okay." Marcus's tone shifted instantly from playful to sharp. I could hear the clicking of his mechanical keyboard. "This sounds personal." "It is, and Marcus, look for cross-collateralization. See if he's pledged assets he doesn't own." "Give me 10 minutes. I'll wake up the legal eagles." I hung up and leaned against the stone balustrade, looking out over the manicured gardens. The party inside was still going, but the energy had shifted. I could see guests whispering, glancing toward the library doors. A shadow fell over me. I turned to see Liliana. She had come out alone. She looked smaller than she had earlier. Her perfect hair was slightly mussed, and her eyes were red. "Is it true?" she asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Which part?" I asked tiredly. "That you're rich, that you built that company." "Yes." "And the money for Leo's." I looked at my cousin. We had been close once, when we were kids, before high school, before Richard told her I was bad influence, and she started believing him. "I don't know yet, Lily, but I know Richard. I know he let me sell my mother's jewelry to buy groceries while he sat in this house. I know he watched me work myself to the bone and laughed about it." Liliana gripped the railing. "He told me he paid for your apartment for a year. He told me you just wasted the money on parties. He said that's why he had to cut you off." "I have never taken a cent FR." Him," I said. "I lived in a basement, Lily. I ate ramen. I didn't party, I worked." Her face crumpled. "He's broke, isn't he? That's why he's pushing this wedding so hard. That's why he made me invite Roman's partners." "He's using you as a lifeline," I said gently. "He's selling you to save himself." She started to cry, silent, shaking sobs. It was the first honest emotion I had seen from her in a decade. My phone buzzed. It was an email from Marcus. Subject, found it. I opened the attachment. It was a PDF of a trust ledger. Beneficiary, Leo Vance. Trustee, Richard Vance. Original balance, 2016, $55,000. Current balance, $0. And below that, a series of withdrawals. Transfer to Vance Realty operating account. Transfer to Mercedes-Benz Financial. Transfer to Club Corp membership dues. He hadn't just stolen it. He had spent my brother's future on country club fees and a car lease. But there was more. A second attachment. A loan application filed 3 days ago with a local bank. Collateral pledged. 15% equity stake in Zipgo Technologies, claimed via verbal partnership agreement. I stared at the screen. He had tried to pledge my company. He had actually walked into a bank and claimed he owned a piece of Zipco because he was my uncle. It was delusional. It was criminal. He stole it, I said to Liliana, showing her the screen. He stole Leo's money to pay for his car, and he tried to pledge my company, a company he mocked an hour ago, to get another loan. Liliana stared at the glowing screen. She saw the withdrawal for the car she knew he drove. She saw the dates. He bought that car for my 16th birthday, she whispered, horror dawning on her face. He used your brother's money to buy me a car. Liliana, I said, putting a hand on her shoulder. You have a choice. You can go back in there and pretend this didn't happen. You can marry Roman and let Richard use you to cover his tracks, or you can help me end it. She looked up at me. The tears were gone. Her eyes were hard. She looked like a Stratton now, not a Vance. He lied to me, she said. He told me I was the princess, but I was just the asset. She straightened her dress. She wiped her face. Do you have the proof? She asked. I have everything, I said, holding up the phone. Then let's go, Liliana said. I think it's time for the toasts. We walked back inside together. The room went quiet as we entered. Richard was standing by the bar, looking sweaty and frantic, whispering to Anthony. Roman was standing apart, watching the door. When he saw Liliana walking next to me, the pizza girl and the princess, side by side, Roman's expression softened. He saw the alignment. Richard saw it too. He paled. I walked straight to the center of the room. I didn't need a microphone. The silence was loud enough. Uncle Richard, I said, I think we need to talk about the Leo Vance Trust. Richard laughed, a high-pitched, manic sound. Kinsley, please, not now, we're cutting the cake. No, Liliana said, her voice cut through his like a knife. She stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with me. We're not cutting the cake, Dad, we're cutting the bullshit. The ballroom, once a sea of polite chatter and clinking crystal, had transformed into an arena. The air was thick with that specific, electric tension that precedes a public execution. I stood in the center of the parquet floor, Liliana at my shoulder, facing down the man who had loomed over my life like a dark storm cloud for a decade. Liliana, don't be ridiculous, Richard said, his voice straining for a jovial tone but cracking into a desperate falsetto. He looked at the guests, his friends, his creditors, his social ladder. My daughter is, she's emotional, it's the wedding jitters. And Kinsley? Well, Kinsley has clearly had a psychotic break. Too much pepperoni fumes, perhaps. A few people chuckled nervously, but most remained silent. They were looking at Liliana. They were looking at the tears that had ruined her makeup and the cold, hard set of her jaw. It wasn't pepperoni fumes, Richard, I said, my voice projecting clearly without a shout. It was forensic accounting. I walked over to the DJ booth. The young man manning the laptop looked terrified, his eyes darting between me and Richard. Give me the auxiliary cord, I said calmly. Don't you dare, Richard screamed, abandoning his calm facade. He started to rush toward me, stumbling over a train of a guest's gown. Security, get her out of here, she's trespassing. Anthony lunged forward to stop me, but Roman stepped into his path. Roman didn't raise a hand, he just stood there, a wall of tailored wool and absolute authority. Anthony bounced off him like a tennis ball hitting a brick wall. Let her speak, Roman said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a judge's gavel. If it's nonsense, Richard, you have nothing to fear. If it's the truth, I want to see it. I took the cord and plugged it into my phone. The giant projection screen behind the stage, which had been displaying a slideshow of Liliana and Roman's cutest moments, flickered. The image of them on a ski trip vanished. In its place, a spreadsheet appeared. It was magnified, crisp, and undeniable. What is this? A woman in the front row whispered loudly. This, I said, turning to the crowd, is the ledger for the Leo Vance Education Trust. It was established by my father's life insurance policy to ensure my younger brother could go to college. It contained $55,000 in 2016. I swiped my screen. The projection changed. And this, I continued, pointing to the highlighted rows that were now 10 feet tall behind me, is the transaction history. June 12, 2016. Withdrawal, $42,000. Destination, Mercedes-Benz of Greenwich. The room gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the space. I looked at Liliana. She was staring at the screen, her hand covering her mouth. June 12th, Liliana whispered, her voice trembling. That was my 16th birthday. I nodded slowly. Happy birthday, Liliana. Your car wasn't a gift from your father's hard work. It was stolen from an orphan. It was the reason my brother had to take out predatory student loans. It was the reason I ate instant noodles for 3 years. Lies, Richard shrieked, his face a map of ruin. It's a fabrication, a Photoshop. She's good with computers, everyone knows that. She faked it. Did I? I swiped again. The screen changed to the loan application from 3 days ago. This is a federal loan application filed by Vance Realty Group, I said. Asset pledged as collateral, 15% equity stake in Zipco Technologies. Owner listed, Richard Vance. I turned to Richard. He was shaking now, physically vibrating with terror. You told the bank you owned part of my company, I said, stepping closer to him. You told them we had a verbal partnership. You tried to leverage a billion-dollar company that you have spent 5 years mocking. I looked at the crowd. Let me be clear, I announced. Richard Vance does not own a single share of Zipco. He is not a board member. He is not an advisor. He is a man who refused to loan me $500 for my mother's funeral expenses because he said I needed to learn resilience. The murmurs in the room exploded into open conversation. The social facade had shattered. The guests, wealthy, powerful people who understood money and ownership better than anyone, were looking at Richard with absolute disgust. In their world, being broke was a sin, but fraud was a heresy. Roman, Richard pleaded, grabbing the sleeve of Roman's tuxedo. You know how business works, it's just creative accounting. We can fix this, I can explain. Roman looked down at Richard's hand on his sleeve as if it were a cockroach. He carefully peeled Richard's fingers off. I do know how business works, Richard, Roman said coldly, and I know that due diligence is a bitch. Roman turned to the crowd. For the record, he said, his voice carrying to the back of the room, Stratton Capital is officially withdrawing our letter of intent to acquire Vance Realty. We do not do business with embezzlers. No, Anthony shouted, his arrogance dissolving into panic. You can't do that. The deal is practically signed. If you walk away, the banks will call the loans on Monday. We'll lose everything. Then you better start packing, I said. Richard looked around the room, searching for a friendly face, a lifeline, anyone who would stand by him. He looked at his golf buddies, his drinking companions, the people he had spent a lifetime trying to impress. They all looked away. They checked their phones. They examined their fingernails. They began to drift toward the exits. Liliana, Richard rasped, turning to his daughter. Lily, please, tell them I'm a good father. I did it for you. I bought the car for you. Liliana stepped forward. She wiped the tears from her cheeks. She looked at the man she had idolized, the man who had taught her that worth was determined by the label on your dress. Slowly, deliberately, she reached up to her neck. She unclasped the diamond necklace she was wearing, a family heirloom Richard had given her that morning. You didn't do it for me, she said, her voice shaking but clear. You did it so you could look like the big man. You did it so you could brag. She dropped the necklace into his hand. It landed with a heavy, final clatter. I don't want it, she said. I don't want the car. I don't want this party. And I don't want to be a Vance if this is what it means. She turned to Roman. I'm sorry, she said softly. You don't have to stay. I know this is a lot. Roman looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time all night. He saw the strength beneath the polish. I'm not going anywhere, Roman said. He took her hand, but I think we should leave this party. The catering is terrible anyway. He looked at me. Kinsley, do you need a ride, or is your driver waiting? I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had smiled in that building in 10 years. I drove myself, I said, and I have one more delivery to make. I walked up to Richard, who was standing alone in the center of the dance floor, clutching the necklace, surrounded by the ruins of his reputation. I reached into my backpack and pulled out a single, small item. It was a receipt. The receipt for the funeral home from 10 years ago, the one I had paid off dollar by dollar over 3 years. I tucked it into the breast pocket of his tuxedo. Paid in full, I whispered. I turned and walked out. The silence followed me all the way to the door, but this time, it wasn't the silence of judgment. It was the silence of respect. The fall of the House of Vance was not a slow decline. It was a collapse. By Monday morning, the news of the engagement party audit had circulated through the local financial blogs. By Wednesday, the bank had frozen Richard's assets pending a fraud investigation. By Friday, the foreclosure notices were posted on the gates of the estate. I didn't gloat, I didn't give interviews. I simply went back to work. Zipco was entering a critical phase. We were launching in 3 new countries, and the acquisition talks with a major tech giant were heating up. I spent my days in the war room, surrounded by whiteboards and my team, doing what I loved. But I made time for one meeting. 2 weeks after the party, I sat in a quiet coffee shop in the city, far away from the country club circuit. The bell above the door chimed, and Liliana walked in. She looked different. The designer clothes were replaced by jeans and a simple sweater. She wore less makeup. She looked tired, but she looked lighter. "Hey," she said, sliding into the booth opposite me. She placed a key on the table. "What's this?" I asked. "The key to the Mercedes," she said. "I sold it. I mean, technically the bank took it, but I signed over the title voluntarily. I didn't want to drive it another mile knowing where the money came from." "Lily, you didn't have to." "I did," she interrupted. "I moved out, Kinsley. I'm staying in a small apartment in the city. Roman offered to let me stay with him, but I need to figure out who I am without the money, without the name." She took a sip of her coffee, her hands wrapping around the warm mug. He's in bad shape," she said quietly. "Anthony is blaming everyone but himself, but Dad, he's just broken. He asks about you." "I bet he does," I said dryly. "Does he want a loan?" "No," Liliana smiled weakly. "He asks if you're really a billionaire. He still can't process it. It breaks his brain." I reached into my bag and pulled out a check. I slid it across the table to her. She looked at it. It was made out to the Leo Vance Education Trust. The amount was $55,000 plus 10 years of compound interest. "I don't understand," she said, looking up at me. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Leo finished college last year," I said. "He's a structural engineer now. He's doing fine. I paid for his school." "Then what is this?" "This is your restart," I said. "You were a victim of his financial abuse too, Lily. He raised you to be helpless so you'd always need him. This is the money he stole, returned to the universe. Use it, go to school, start a business, or just pay your rent while you figure it out, but do it on your own terms." Tears welled in her eyes again, but they didn't fall. She took a deep breath and nodded. "I'm going to nursing school," she said. "I applied yesterday. I want to do something real, something where I help people." "You'll be great at it," I said. "And Kinsley," she added, her voice stronger. "Thank you for blowing it all up. I think you saved me." I smiled. "Just don't ask me to deliver pizza to your dorm." 6 months later, I stood in the driveway of the Vance estate. The "for sale" sign had been removed. The grass was a little overgrown, and the windows were dark. It looked smaller than I remembered. Without the noise of the parties and the pretension of the people who lived there, it was just a house. A pile of bricks and mortar. A black sedan pulled up the long driveway. Roman stepped out. "You bought it," he stated, walking up to stand beside me. "I bought the debt," I corrected. "The bank was happy to offload the mortgage for pennies on the dollar. It turns out, toxic assets are cheap." "What are you going to do with it?" Roman asked. Move in, become the new matriarch. I laughed. God no, too many ghosts. I looked at the house where I had begged for help and been turned away. I looked at the balcony where I had stood and realized I was alone in the world. I'm turning it into an incubator, I said. The Vance Foundation for Young Trepreneurs. Free housing, workspace, and seed capital for kids who have great ideas but no family money to back them. Kids who are told they're failures because they don't fit the mold. Roman smiled. It was a genuine, warm smile. That's poetic justice. It's optimization, I said, turning away from the house. Why let a good asset go to waste? Speaking of assets, Roman said, my firm is still interested in that Series B round for Zipco, if you're still taking meetings. I might have an opening next week, I said, checking my watch. But you'll have to come to me, no country clubs. Deal, Roman said. I walked back to my car. It wasn't a luxury sedan. It was a practical, mid-range SUV. I got in, threw my bag in the passenger seat, and checked my phone. Active drivers, 25,400. Daily revenue, $3.1 million. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the mansion. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to. The past was settled, the ledger was balanced, and the road ahead was wide open. I had a delivery to make, not of pizza, but of promise. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't running away from anything. I was just driving.